This is the I Heart My Life show. Welcome to the I Heart My Life show. Today we have somatic practitioner, entrepreneur, and amazing teacher, Blaize Hall, with us here. She's going to be sharing a little bit more about her work and her specific methodologies. So I'm excited to dive in. Welcome, Blaize.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
So, can you tell us a little bit about the work that you do in the world? I know it encompasses a lot of different modalities. Looks like you have a lot of different trainings. And in particular, I'm really excited to learn more about the somatic work. I've kind of been diving into that this year, in particular, after having my baby a little bit ago and experiencing some burnout, 10 years of being a business owner, having anxiety. So, selfishly, I'm excited to learn more about what it is that you do and how you support driven women and people.
Thank you so much. Absolutely. The somatic work is at the core and the forefront of my focus right now. After many years as well as an artist and entrepreneur, I also was experiencing a lot of disconnect from my body from hustle culture, capitalist culture. And I think most of us who are drawn into the healing arts got there originally because we wanted to heal ourselves, right? And so that's kind of been my journey and why that is my primary focus right now, as well as everything else I do.
And when you say, you've experienced it, how did that manifest for you? What did that actually look like in your life?
Yeah. So to dive right in, small trigger warning, medical trigger warning for people. I experienced a lot of chronic pain and autoimmune conditions like Hashimoto's, which then eventually led to a battle with thyroid cancer. So my body was so disconnected from what I actually needed to be healthy that I believe it manifested into a cancer. And I had to press full stop on my life and pause everything. And it was a huge wake up call, and I was not showing up as the parent I wanted to be physically. Obviously, I had a lot of physical limitations, and then also just trauma patterns wise, my communication with my child was not what I knew it needed to be. I was living out generational patterns of communication and parenting that were not what I envisioned for my child. It was just what was in my body. And I am so grateful for the people in my life who are able to step in and point me towards this training and this work. So, and this was, many years ago now. But yeah, I was able to completely reprogram my system so that I could show up with the tools that I want as a parent and a business owner and an artist and lead my life from a health first place. And now that's what I offer to others.
So amazing.
Yeah.
So, can you share a little bit more? So, when you were diagnosed, what was kind of the journey to realizing, oh, wait, I may have manifested this? Or did you know that right away? I'm just curious to know how that sort of unfolded.
Yeah, so it really was a multi-year journey. I've been a single parent since day one with my child. And the first few years, it just felt like chaos, like just swimming to keep my head above water. And I just kind of figured like every parent, and especially every single parent, is supposed to be this like all out exhausted. And it felt normal because that's what I saw reflected all around me. Everyone was just burned out, stressed out, exhausted. And then it got to a point as my daughter got a little bit older and I was dating someone. I'm actually dating him again right now. So it's being,
Full circle.
yeah, full circle, big drinky there. But he kind of really was the person who shed a light on it for me and just said, like, this level of chronic pain and of chronic exhaustion is not what people should just settle for. And it's not normal. And so I did start actually taking the time to do the testing and the medical work to figure out what was going on and started to get these diagnoses. But I knew there was something else more deeply wrong. I know I had cancer about a year before any of the doctors ever found it. And they had been doing scans and testing and just saying, nope, it's nothing. Like, we've got you on your thyroid supplement. That's all you need. And I just had this deep knowing that that was not true. And so I trusted that instinct and continued to press for more scans, more MRIs, more testing, and we eventually found it.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so, did you actually go through chemo or radiation or any sort of treatment?
Yeah, I had a full thyroidectomy and lateral neck dissection, and then I did do radiation, not chemo, but radioactive iodine. So I had to go off and stay in isolation for about 10 days for my child who was 3 at the time, which was really challenging, especially as a single parent.
How long was it until you started to released some of the chronic pain and started to feel some of the shifts of the work that I know you now practice in the world?
Yeah. So thankfully, I had already started that process years before being diagnosed with cancer. And that journey was kind of just like the tail end of realizing, like, no, this is like a lifelong shift. This is like a whole reframe of how I live my life now. But
Mm.
thankfully, I had found some parenting coaches and somatic work and started that journey a few years before that. So I had started to draw new tools into my toolkit, new ways of relating, conscious communication, nonviolent communication, resourcing practices, somatic experiencing, all of that. And then kind of cancer, I guess, was like the nail in the coffin to my old way of living, so to speak,
Right.
where I just realized, like, yeah, this is not just like do a few practices, like join a cohort for 6 months and then go back to living the same way.
Right. It was a full life overhaul.
Yeah, pretty much.
Mhm. For everyone listening or watching, can you just share a little bit about what somatic work actually is?
Yes. So if anyone's never heard the word somatic, it comes from the Greek root word soma, which means the body. So it's practices that are body based first, that we apply to nervous system work, mental health work, pretty much anything that you want to change starts with your body first, I believe. And there's always mindset shifts and narrative shifts and cognitive shifts that we can make, but if our body's response to our experience isn't changed, then our mind is just stuck in loops that don't actually stick. Does that make sense? So, yeah,
Totally.
it's bringing in movement, tapping in certain meridian points on the body, nervous system shakeouts. I mean, there's hundreds and hundreds of practices that one can bring from all different modalities. And it just depends what's the right fit for each person.
Yeah. Thinking about, your clients and people you've worked with recently, what are some examples of a symptom or an experience that someone might be having where somatic work would be useful?
Yeah, I have quite a wide range of clients, ranging on any topics from someone going through a gender journey and wanting support on that, learning to feel really safe and feel beautiful in their body as they're changing their perception of self. To one of my clients is a CEO, and so we're working on building body-based confidence in boardrooms and meetings and presentations. Another client is having marital problems, so learning how to actually feel present in moment to moment interaction with his family. So, different practices that we would use, I'll just pick one of those in relationship skills. A lot of times, our responses in our relationships are habitual. They're what we picked up from our parents, from previous relationships, or just sort of the robotics that we all fall into at some points, kind of automatic things. And so little things like this person had a pattern of sort of just focusing on tasks, being very task focused throughout the day and turning away from connection with family members, all his family members, but also especially his wife. And so this was obviously creating like a chronic disconnect. And so we focused on, okay, what are some of the root causes of that based on past narratives and also based on what he was feeling in his body. And what we explored, kind of reworking some of those patterns, are that every time connection is coming, it's at a time when he is really feeling like he needs to be focused on something else. And his body would tense up. He would have a little bit of like nervous breath and not feel receptive. And so then that's automatically what he would do. So we broke that down into two parts. First part is setting boundaries around connection so that his family even knew when it would be a good time to try to connect, come in with a kiss on the cheek, not right in the middle of a business phone call, right? You know? And a lot of us don't even have the basic skills within ourselves to confidently set boundaries. So we brought it down into the body. What did he need to feel in his body to feel resourced enough to respectfully and lovingly set that boundary? He needed to feel calm in his body. He needed to feel access to his own breath. A lot of us just live so disconnected that we don't even feel what's going on nervous system wise. So then we brought it into breath practice, a little bit of self sensing, squeezing along his own body. Where is the edge of himself and other. Does that make sense? It's a long process.
Yeah.
It's hard to like break it all down in a really short spiel. So we practiced the boundary setting. And then once we got that really comfortable in his body and communicated to his loved ones, then we focused on receptivity practices. How could he feel ready to receive connection if there was an immediate knee jerk reaction of closing off? And so we actually examined the insecurities of like, what happens when you are vulnerable to more connection with others? Where are some of the root fears around that? And how do we resource that? So letting
Mm.
him explore more movement within himself, exploring what actually feels good to him. I asked him, like, when do you feel pleasure in your body? And he was like, honestly, I don't know. And so the homework was to go and orient his life and his body toward pleasure for a week, exploring what does feel good. So that then instead of just like, oh yeah, I'm going to receive whatever someone's giving me, no, like I can ask for what I actually want that feels genuinely good. What kind of hug feels good? What kind of embrace feels nourishing? When, how firm? Like all these little things that we just don't even consider because we just like, oh yeah, someone's giving me a hug. All right, quick hug, like brush it off. What happens when we know how to communicate what would feel really, really good to us? You know?
Mhm. I love that. I'm just thinking about my daughter and, she is very connected to her body and very expressive. I'm just wondering at what point do you feel like most of us disconnect from our body or what's causing that?
Yeah. May I ask how old your daughter is?
22 months.
Amazing. Yeah, so it's
Mm.
so easy at that age because there hasn't been socialization to sort of block that. My daughter is 7 right now. She still is very connected to her body as well, but I think that's because of how we've kind of grown up together, and I say grown up together because I had to rework a lot of stuff, so I say, like, I grew up really when I had her.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, a lot of us can start being socialized away from our own physical instincts as young as 2, 3. We are taught how to form ourselves around the social happenings around us from a very young age, maybe as soon as we're in preschool, even younger. It really depends. I mean, some babies, this is so sad, and I hope people aren't still doing this, but there's like the cry it out method. Some babies are left to themselves, for really long periods as young as only, a couple of months old or something. And so they could already be learning to dissociate from what their actual needs are because their cries aren't being met. And so their nervous systems are already learning, okay,
Mm,
communicating my needs doesn't do anything. So I just need to disconnect. It really depends. It's different for everyone. It depends on family life, social life, all
yeah.
kinds of things.
And when you think about your daughter and, I know you said you had to rewrite some of your own family patterns. What are some of the things that you're doing with her that others could learn from that will help us to stay connected to our body?
Yeah. I think a lot of it involves just slowing down and taking time to be present with what is. I'm not saying I do this perfectly, of course, but yeah, like taking a moment. So if she's having a tough response to something, instead of just rushing her through that response, a lot of us think that like, oh, if we take a more gentle approach and more slow approach to parenting, we need to be able to have this life that has no time deadlines. And that's just not true because actually when we take a few moments to breathe and connect with what is happening, we actually can then more gracefully move through to where we're aiming, if that makes sense. Well,
Yeah, for sure.
so for example, if she's having a really hard time, I'll just use this example. I was teaching a yoga class the other day, and she really wanted to help me get my music set up and pick out the playlist for me and everything, which is great. And I had a moment to do that, but she was kind of slowing me down because class was supposed to start. Everyone was there waiting and ready. And so I wanted to just do some of it myself and then let her pick out the playlist. And it wasn't happening, and so I set everything down and just got down to her level and connected with her, held her arms gently, bringing in some touch, some conscious touch, some eye gazing, just took a breath, and just from there, confidently and calmly set a boundary and said, You need to let me do what I need to do. And I promise you will get to pick out the playlist. Can we do that? And then from there it was easy because I had actually connected with her as opposed to just like a lot of us move through life like, no, no, like not even looking at each other, you
Right.
know? Does that make sense?
Mm. That's such a beautiful example. Yeah, it definitely does. I remember seeing a video on Instagram recently. It was just a reel that someone had put up about how when you're hurrying your child, that creates anxiety in them. And so ever since then, I've thought about that. Even if we're walking outside and she's moving a lot slower than I would like to move, just being with her in that moment instead of rushing her because we really don't have anywhere to go anyway. But, we have a tendency to like need to keep things moving,
Mhm.
and they're so great at just, not really having that concept of time and being able to be so present that there's, in that example, there's a lot to see right in that immediate area. We don't need to keep walking down to the other path right now. And so when I think about it from that perspective, there's so much that we can learn from their pace of life and, what they're bringing to each and every day for us. That's also really eye opening.
Yeah, I love that example. And then I think from there, the challenge for you as the parent becomes to look inward and see, okay, what is prompting you to want to move faster? And the two things I would come up with off the cuff are one, urgency culture. Like we all have this rush deeply ingrained, especially Americans, I would say. I mean, I haven't lived too many other places abroad, but it doesn't seem to be as prevalent anywhere else as it does here. Just this pervasive sense that we need to rush through our lives, never doing enough. And so then that's, where in your nervous system can you resource slowing down? If you're feeling the need for more dopamine or more stimulation on the walk, where can you get it? That isn't the end of the walk. Is there something right here, some birds in the trees, or gazing at the clouds in the sky? Or what is it that you can bring in to help yourself have the level of engagement with the space that you're in?
Yeah,
And
it's really
then
beautiful.
the other part is there something in your body that is needing actually high energy? Because we talk a lot about nervous system regulation, and a lot of us talk about downgrading our nervous system, relaxing, doing some breath to calm down, doing a stage by stage relaxation. And that is so important and so applicable to urgency culture and capitalist culture. And it is what most of us need more of. But regulating your nervous system also can mean finding the edge of arousal. And a lot of us don't get that either. We're just expected to stay right in our middle range with our nervous systems all the time. And a healthy nervous system actually needs a full range of expression throughout the day. And so maybe in that moment you need to downgrade a little bit, but maybe there's some part of your nervous system or just your body, your cardiovascular system that's wanting a jog or a 10-minute hit workout or, something that gets you all the way up to your highest level of arousal and expression. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes total sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I know this is a simple question, but how do you encourage people or teach them to tap into that so they do have clarity around what their body wants? Because if we are so disconnected, how can we possibly, understand more about what our body's telling us?
Yeah, it really comes down to building an ongoing listening practice with your body. And of course, I don't mean literally every second of every single day. You're just going, okay, body, what do we do next? That's great if you're in a vacation container or you have a day where you can just go moment to moment with your body. I definitely recommend spending long form days like that with your body when, if you can. Like I did that for my birthday. I completely cleared the day and was just like, all right, body, what's next? And it was amazing. We had waves of grief coming up. We had ecstatic laughter. We did all kinds of fun things. Me and my body. But in a more practical day to day life, for those of us who do have commitments and jobs and whatever else, it is an ongoing listening practice. So just bringing in more moments of connection. So if you realize you've been sitting at your desk for an hour, can you take literally 90 seconds to connect with your breath, track sensations in your body? Where in your body do you feel pleasure? Where in your body do you feel tension? And ask your body, what do you need a little bit more of within that tiny little moment? And if you start living your life day to day that way, you will start to get really clear on, man, I really need to add a couple of yoga classes in this week. Or, wow, I just woke up with a surge of energy. Maybe I don't need coffee right now. Maybe I need to go out for a quick power walk without the automatic making my coffee or whatever my usual morning ritual is. And you will start to hear it. Your body, not literally a voice, but almost like you will start to feel it more and more and more as you bring this in as a way of living.
I hope you're enjoying the episode so far. Before we get back to the interview, I wanted to share a little something I think you'll find valuable. If you're looking for more clarity on what you want in life or feel like something is holding you back, I've created a free Dream Life Guide just for you. It's a step-by-step resource to help you get clear on your goals and break through any mindset blocks that might be in the way. You can grab it at iheartmylife.com/guide. And as a bonus, I've also included a private podcast feed to go along with the guide to give you even more value and support. So head over to iheartmylife.com/guide to download it for free. All right, now back to the conversation. How have you changed the way that you live after experiencing what you experienced health-wise? Like, what are some of the practices that you do on a regular basis?
Yeah, to be honest, it's still an unfolding of restructuring my life. And that's the reality that we all live in. We do still have, structures that are around us and ways that we can respond to them. So I am still in the process of reworking my life, but just to start, just different little healthy habits. I put my phone far away from my bed so that the first thing I do in the morning, I do still hear the alarm go off and I can actually I set it up to verbally be able to stop it. The first thing I do is open my window and eye gaze outside. Like,
Mm.
take in colors, take in sensations from nature, connect with the real world, before I start connecting with the virtual world. I have a narrative process of journaling that I do at least several times a week. It's not necessarily every day. I connect with movement throughout the day. So as soon as we get off this call, I'm going to do some hip unwinding, some joint unraveling, check in with my breath as I do that, some bouncing. It doesn't have to be a lot of long practices. You can fit them in throughout the day. And then sometimes it is important to do longer practices. So if I notice that like a week has gone by and I haven't done any of like longer form breath work, and I know that there's grief that it feels stuck in my midsection or something like that, it's called bracketing. So sometimes we don't have space to process a certain thing. And so acknowledging what is in my body and what needs space to process, I will literally schedule it. So, for example, the last few months I've been going through a really challenging thing with a family member, and I've felt the tension all through my midsection of carrying that. And I will literally put it in my calendar. Okay, I'm scheduling a grief focused breath work on Friday at 3 p.m. and I'll give myself an hour to let it flow and let my body process it.
Yeah, I realized recently that I'm a very shallow breather, and so I've been trying to do more breath work, and it's so amazing, like, how, like, just constrained my whole system is in terms of, like, I can't even really take a deep breath or, do a lot of the processes. It's getting better, it's, like, loosening up a bit, but in the beginning, it was so tight and so hard to even, breathe deeply.
Yeah. Do you make sound with your actual vocal cords when you do breath movement?
Not normally, no.
Okay.
Is that helpful?
That's one thing I would recommend, and one thing that was really transformative for me because I also struggled with that for a while of having that shallow breath and feeling a lot of constriction. And our vocal cords have a whole cluster of nerves around them that are whole connected to the whole polyvagal nervous system and very attuned to our autonomic nervous system. So our own sound, the power of our own voice is a huge gateway in to regulating and to releasing.
And does it matter what type of sound you make?
Not really. Anything that feels natural, I wouldn't like do a really loud primal scream if that doesn't feel accessible. Like
Right.
definitely it can be really helpful and I definitely do that sometimes, but I would yeah, listen, feel into what feels good and nourishing. So really ask your voice like, "Hey, if I need to let something out right now, what really wants to come?" Sometimes it might be song. Sometimes it could be actual words directed around a situation. I love humming or even just doing kind of like a jaw shakeout, like, huh, and getting a little growl going in there. So don't keep it down out.
Really good. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Love it. So, can you talk a little bit about your signature program that you have?
Yes. So my flagship framework right now is the Whole Body Communicator. And I designed it after many years of studying all these different modalities and observing people in many different forms over my entire life as an artist, a dancer, an actor, and then eventually a somatic practitioner, yoga teacher, naked yoga teacher. And the thing that I noticed everything boils down to is communication. So if there's anything in your life that you want to change, it has to do with how you're communicating, whether it's with other people, yourself, or your own body. So I break it down into those three phases: communication with your body, communication with yourself, your higher self, inner knowing, whatever you like to use, and then with others. And so the program has three phases. The body part, we focus on nervous system tools, connecting with your body. And that's where a lot of people really do need to start because some people have almost no way of even tracking sensations or no way of even connecting to their body when they are in these situations that they want to be communicating about this other stuff that they want to bring into their life or change in their life or relationships. And then from there, once we have the communication with the body fluid and open, then we can start to navigate communication with ourself. What self narratives might be unsupportive? Are we in growth mindset? Are we in fixed mindset? Once we do mindset work and little shifts there, transformational shifts there, then we're actually ready to break down what communication with the outside world is stopping you from what you want and with who. Sometimes, like my one client is more focused around family members, another one is more focused on being able to communicate confidently in public. Some people, it's more communication with figures of authority. It all depends. And the beautiful thing about this being one on one work, and I am going to be offering it as a group program under a slightly different structure in the new year, which I'm really excited for because it will be more accessible for a lot of people. But the amazing thing about doing it one on one is we get to navigate in and out of the different phases as people need to. Some people come in and we do some nervous system work and some body sensing work, but they're actually not even super receptive to that until we talk about what growth mindset and fixed mindset are and move them into growth mindset so they're actually more willing to try things. And then some people have a ton of nervous system background and they already have a ton of really helpful practices, but they just don't know how to apply them in the moments to the situations that they're in. So then that's where we just don't.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so great to work privately because then you can truly tailor it, and I know that, it's not a one size fits all approach, so that's so amazing.
Yeah.
And so I can't skip over this. So what is naked yoga? Is it literally just what I think it is?
Yes, I wasn't sure if you would want to talk about that, but I do love to bring it in because it's so fun and spicy. Yeah, it's essentially just a boundaried container where we have clothing optional embodiment practices. Usually it's clothing optional yoga, but I've taught clothing optional somatic dance as well and other practices. And yeah, it's essentially a safe place for people to be in their bodies without clothes in community. I kind of stumbled upon it many years ago. I was doing nude comedy with this other organization, and someone there was saying, "Wow, you should really teach naked yoga." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, that sounds like such a good fit." And what I've discovered over the years is that it is this fun thing and this, radical release for people, but it really is deep experiential, like physically experiential exposure therapy for people to completely retrain their bodies and their minds. Well,
Yeah,
many
I can
of us,
imagine.
yeah, many of us, our relationship around nudity, as soon as we get past the very innocent young age of just being nude and free and we start to really receive that pressure to be clothed, the next time we're really getting naked is around probably a lover or someone that
Mhm.
we're wanting to impress or be evaluated. And so our relationship around nudity becomes, very like, okay, judging my body, you're judging my body. Like, and then for a lot of us, especially women, there's a lot of trauma that can come up depending on what situations we're in, what we're exposed to. And yeah, I definitely experienced many of those situations. And I was also a sex worker for several years. So a lot of stuff comes up in those spaces, a lot of transactional relating, a lot of boundaries not being respected. So I had a lot of trauma in my body. And I've always been an extremely sex positive, very free spirited person relationally. I'm polyamorous, I'm very open, gender fluid, sexually fluid. But I was actually having a trauma response in my body around intimacy. And as I was in the nudist community and participating in these classes, and then eventually holding space for these classes and leading them, a shift in my body was taking place because my body was over time with multiple reps of this experience. My body was learning that it was safe to be nude and that there was a place where I could be with people and be safe, and my body wouldn't be judged, and I could trust what was going to unfold, and I could hold my own boundaries really clearly and even hold space for others really clearly and safely. And so that's really what it is. I mean, there's definitely some people who are just in town on vacation and like, "Oh, this looks like a fun, titillating experience. Let's go try something wild." But a lot of people are really there showing up month after month, doing their healing work in a really unique way. It's just as much of a nervous system practice and a somatic practice as everything else.
And how would you know that your body's holding on to trauma?
I mean, the signs are there. So if you're feeling a lot of chronic tension, chronic pain, there's all kinds of different signs, and I do think we need to be careful because it's easy to scroll through the internet right now. Trauma is like a buzzword, and people will be like, "Are you bloated every day? You probably have PTSD." And, all these little TikTok videos. I do think it's important to really take time to listen to your own body and connect and think back through your history. I think there's sort of two waves of things that are happening right now socially. There's sort of the wave of people who are still kind of like, no, I don't have any trauma. And for those people, I'm like, boy, girl, you alive right now? You probably do. And I don't want to just make a blanket statement that we all got trauma, but we probably do. We all, if you lived through the pandemic, you do. So if you're here, you probably do. And there's the wave of people who are kind of just like watching all the short little TikTok videos and Instagram videos and going, oh my God, that's me, that's me, that's me, and self diagnosing all these different trauma conditions without actually working with a professional and taking the time to understand themselves in a deep, long form way.
So good. So, as we start to wrap this up, where can people find you online?
Yeah. So in the show notes, I'll make sure that we have a link to the Whole Body Communicator program. You can always find me Weeping Willow Wellness. That's the website. That's the Instagram. The email is also Weeping Willow Wellness 1 at Gmail.
Amazing. And the final question we ask all of our guests: what is one way that people can create a life that's better than their dreams, that far exceeds their wildest expectations?
I love that question. I think it's absolutely beautiful because, yeah, your dreams are your higher self calling you into what's absolutely beautiful for you. And your dreams will evolve. So, what I always like to frame for clients, for myself, for everyone is that right now, think of the biggest, biggest, best dream you can and start taking just the very next step. So, dream super, super big and then plan super, super small. All you need to know is what you're doing today, this week, and maybe like 5 months out. Kind of 5-year plan. I don't think we do that anymore because really once you get to the next step, those dreams are going to crystallize in a way likely that you can't even imagine right now. But as long as you're following those nudges to what the next best thing is, Right, like, if you asked yourself 10 years ago, I think you said you were in London 10 years ago or something, like,
Mhm.
if you would be moved back and have your child, like, having this life with their cousins and family, would you have envisioned that?
No, not even 5 years ago, so,
Right.
yeah.
But now you're there, and you've followed those nudges all the way there, and I'm sure you continue
Mhm.
following them in all the most beautiful ways.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Amazing, Blaze. Well, I really appreciate you. Thank you for all this wisdom. Thank you for your vulnerability and for doing this work in the world. I really appreciate you.
Thank you so much for having me. This was such a gift.
Thank you for listening to the I Heart My Life show. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with 3 friends or post about it on social media using the hashtag I Heart My Life show. And don't forget to rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts. It really does help us spread the movement far and wide. Remember, everything you desire is possible. Keep believing in your dreams and taking action.